Rock and roll was always supposed to make parents nervous. That was part of the deal. But some bands didn't just push the limits. They grabbed them by the collar, lit them on fire, and danced on the ashes. The result was congressional hearings, burned records, school bans, and full-on moral panic. If the history of music's most feared acts interests you, consider subscribing so you never miss a video like this one. For decades, parents across America organized letter-writing campaigns, staged public protests, and pressured radio stations to pull certain artists off the air. Some bands were banned from entire cities. Others were hauled before government committees and accused of corrupting the nation's youth. These are the 10 creepiest rock bands of all time that parents tried to ban. Number 10. Marilyn Manson. By the mid-90s, no act in American music generated more organized outrage than this one. Born Brian Warner in Canton, Ohio, the musician adopted a name stitched together from Marilyn Monroe and Charles Manson, a deliberate collision of glamour and evil that told you everything about his intentions before you ever heard a single note. Parents groups, religious organizations, and politicians lined up to condemn his concerts, which featured mock crucifixions, simulated violence, and imagery drawn from the darkest corners of a cult tradition.
Just what they tell you.
City councils in cities across the South canceled tour dates outright. Some venues refused to book him under pressure from local clergy. His album Antichrist Superstar, released in the mid-90s, became one of the most protested records of its generation. None of it slowed him down. He sold millions of albums and became, almost in spite of the backlash, one of the defining voices of alternative rock. Number 9. WASP. Few bands made the Parents Music Resource Center sweat quite like WASP. Founded in Los Angeles in the early 1980s, the band led by Blackie Lawless built a stage show so aggressively offensive that it read less like a concert and more like a provocation crafted specifically for Senate testimony. Raw meat was thrown into the audience. Animal traps were used as props. The imagery was violent, sexual, and deliberately designed to horrify. Senator Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, and her coalition of Washington wives singled out WASP as one of the most dangerous acts in rock music during the landmark 1985 Senate hearings on explicit lyrics. The band wore the distinction proudly. Their music was never particularly subtle, but their talent for manufactured outrage was, in its own way, a kind of genius. Number 8. Slayer. The fastest, loudest, and most lyrically violent of the big four thrash metal acts, Slayer spent the better part of 3 decades making parents reach for the phone. Songs exploring war, serial killers, Nazi atrocities, and demonic imagery weren't buried in metaphor. They were blunt, graphic, and unrelenting. School administrators across the country confiscated Slayer merchandise. Youth pastors cited the band by name in sermons. What made the panic particularly intense was that Slayer's audience was young. Teenagers in small towns from California to Georgia were wearing the logo on handmade patches. Parents who couldn't identify a single album title still knew that the band's name meant something that they needed to worry about. The irony, noted by music critics many times over the years, was that 2 of the 4 founding members were practicing Catholics. Number 7. Black Sabbath. In 1970, 4 working-class men from Birmingham, England, released a debut album so sonically dark that critics assumed it was a gimmick. It was not. Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, and Ozzy Osbourne had invented something new, heavy metal with genuine menace. The opening track began with a tolling bell and a thunderstorm before dissolving into a riff that sounded To many American parents, like a soundtrack from somewhere none of them wanted their children to visit.
As you hear these words telling you now, I stay, I tell you.
Churches organized record burnings in the early 70s. Radio programmers refused airplay in several markets. The band was accused of promoting Satanism, witchcraft, and nihilism, charges they largely denied while absolutely refusing to change a single note. Decades later, the band is recognized as one of the most influential acts in the history of popular music. The parents who tried to stop them never stood a chance. Number 6. Motley Crue. Sex, drugs, and deliberate excess weren't incidental to Motley Crue, they were the product. The Los Angeles band formed in 1981 and immediately set about creating the most dangerously appealing image in rock music. Their look alone, teased hair, leather, chains, and makeup applied with a shovel, was enough to make suburban parents lock the cable box. Their behavior offstage was considerably worse. The Parents Music Resource Center put Motley Crue squarely in their crosshairs during the mid-80s, and the band did nothing to discourage the attention. Concerts were loud, chaotic, and reckless in ways that genuinely alarmed venue security and local authorities. Nicky Sixx survived a clinical overdose in 1987 that he later wrote about in unflinching detail. The band's longevity surprised even some of their most devoted fans. Somehow, through all of it, they held together. That's 6 down and 5 to go. Before we get to the top 5, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. It's always great to hear from viewers all across the country. Number 5. Alice Cooper. Decades before Marilyn Manson made shock rock a genre category, Alice Cooper, born Vincent Furnier in Detroit, Michigan, was already executing the playbook. By the early 1970s, his stage show featured guillotines, electric chairs, fake blood, and a live boa constrictor. He played a murderous villain before the concept of a stage persona was widely understood, and parents who saw clips on the evening news had very little frame of reference for what they were looking at. School boards in several states discussed banning students from wearing Cooper-related merchandise. Religious groups in the American South organized formal protests. His album Billion Dollar Babies, released in 1973, reached number 1 in both the United States and the United Kingdom, despite, or perhaps because of, the moral firestorm surrounding it. He was one of the first rock musicians to prove that parental outrage was, commercially speaking, a perfectly acceptable substitute for radio airplay. Number 4. Kiss. The face paint, the fire breathing, the platform boots tall enough to be classified as a structural concern. When Kiss arrived in the mid-1970s, parents across America didn't know exactly what they were looking at, but they were fairly certain they didn't want it in their living rooms. Religious groups circulated pamphlets claiming that the name Kiss stood for something unholy, a rumor the band repeatedly denied and which has never been substantiated. None of that mattered to the letter writers and the PTA committees who demanded radio stations stop playing them. What they failed to anticipate was that their children were absolutely captivated. Kiss built one of the most devoted fan bases in rock history, precisely because the band felt like something forbidden. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley understood instinctively what every great showman has always known. Nothing sells quite like someone else's disapproval. Number 3. Twisted Sister. They looked like a nightmare and sounded like a dare. Twisted Sister, the New York-bred glam metal band fronted by Dee Snider, spent years grinding through the club circuit before exploding nationally in the early 1980s. Their music videos, particularly We're Not Gonna Take It and I Wanna Rock, featured teenagers defying authority figures in ways that made parents of the era deeply uncomfortable, because the kids on screen were winning. Dee Snider's appearance before the Senate Commerce Committee in 1985 became one of the most memorable moments of the entire PMRC hearings. He arrived without a lawyer, represented only himself, and delivered a measured, articulate defense of rock music that left several senators visibly unprepared. He quoted their own lyrics back at them, correctly, and challenged the logic of their proposed warning label system point by point. The hearings intended to diminish him. They made him a hero.
People can interpret it many ways. Ms. Gore was looking for sadomasochism and bondage, and she found it.
Number 2. The Dead Kennedys.
Ronald Reagan, born again with fascist craving. You're gonna make me president.
No band on this list caused more trouble in more different directions simultaneously. The San Francisco punk act led by Jello Biafra didn't just offend parents. They offended governments, corporations, politicians, and occasionally their own fans. Their name alone guaranteed that they would never receive mainstream radio support. Their songs, which addressed American foreign policy, consumer culture, and police brutality with equal venom, felt genuinely dangerous in the early 1980s. In 1986, Biafra was prosecuted on charges of distributing harmful matter to minors after parents complained about poster art included in the band's Frankenchrist album. The trial lasted months and drew national attention. He was ultimately acquitted, but the case became a landmark moment in debates about artistic freedom and censorship in popular music. The Dead Kennedys were never going to be on Top 40 radio. They were never trying to be. Number 1. The Rolling Stones. Long before congressional hearings and warning labels, there was a simpler kind of parental outrage, the kind born purely from watching Mick Jagger move. When the Rolling Stones arrived in America in the early 1960s, television producers on variety programs instructed their camera operators to shoot the band only from the waist up. The hip movements were considered too suggestive for a family audience. Radio stations in the American South refused to play their records. Schools banned students from wearing band-related clothing. Parents who had already made their peace with Elvis Presley found themselves freshly alarmed. The Stones had a looseness, a casual contempt for propriety that felt genuinely threatening to a certain kind of mid-century household.
Put me out! Put me out! Put me out! Misery!
Decades later, the band is woven so deeply into the fabric of American culture that it is almost impossible to remember they were once the enemy. That might be the most satisfying ending of all.